All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I'm your host, Cardon with Cody the Oracle.
Howdy, everyone.
And we are going to analyze another one of Andrew Yang's policy platforms from his site, yang2020.com, in our quest to try and discuss all of the 90-plus policy platforms that Andrew Yang has suggested on his website. And here's one that hits home very deeply to our hearts here in Los Angeles, and that is Andrew Yang's suggestions on how to combat wildfires, which are
reduce wildfires.
How to reduce wildfires, which anybody that has a television or watches the news has been a huge thing in 2018 and 2019. So, Cody, catch us up on what Andrew Yang proposes for reducing wildfires.
All right. Just off the bat, just some of the little data points he puts out. So the last 4 years have been the hottest on record, which based on current emission levels turns likely to continue. I don't know what it has to do with fires. So anyway, decades of fighting the spread of wildfires has prevented a natural cycle of thinning that has kept forest fires under control. Before European settlement of the West, 1.5 million acres would burn each year. Since then, it's about 57,000 acres a year. So I just want to get that out of the way. That one of the reasons why we're seeing wildfires a lot right now where we didn't in the past is because we used to there'd be fires and stuff would burn. Now we keep it not burning, but not good either. And then a bunch of dead brush burns. So what Andrew Yang is proposing is to quintuple the budget for the U.S. Forestry Service and specifically tailor it to focus on fire prevention. I actually think that's a really neat idea. Appoint a Secretary of Agriculture who recognizes the importance of preventing mega fires using science-backed techniques. I don't know how that would work, but yeah, cool. And work with federal agencies such as the EPA, your favorite, to adjust how specific metrics are measured, to take a more long-term view of the costs and benefits of prescribed fires, and then work with Congress to pass legislation aligning incentives for states, developers, and homeowners towards fire prevention and avoiding high-risk areas. That's another one of those things that's like, it's the same thing people say all the time. Like people have houses on Tornado Alley. Like tornadoes come through here routinely. People still live there. I think it's weird to say, hey, don't build houses there. There's fires. Yeah. I think, it's...
So there's some things that I love about this, and there's some things that I hate about this. First off, there's times when Andrew Yang, I feel really comfortable with him because I feel like he's been there and he's done that when it comes to economics, and I swear he's a Republican wolf in Democrat sheep's clothing. And then there's other times where I really feel like he panders. The opening sentence of this saying the last 4 years have been the 4 hottest on record.
It was a little unnecessary, but
it's an obvious just wink, wink to the climate change crazies.
I don't necessarily disbelieve that the last 4 years have been hot. We can get into,
but it's not a trend of global warming.
Exactly. That's where it gets a little bit weird. Yeah. Where they kind of
so let's talk facts and science. So because at the end of the day, the math hats that we see at all the Andrew Yang rallies are really one of our favorite aspects of his campaign, and we love talking the science behind this. Now, this is something I really appreciate about Andrew Yang. Is he recognizes that before European settlement of the West, 1.5 million acres would burn each year. Since then, it's only about 57,000 acres, all right? And less than 2% of the California forest land saw proactive treatment in some recent years. And that's also one of the most effective means of controlling fires. Now, this is where the big D word that Democrats don't like is going to have to come into play, and it seems like Andrew Yang is recognizing that, and that's deregulation. There are 8 different studies and 8 different hoops that have to be jumped through and boxes that have to be checked in order to do a controlled burn on 1 acre of California forest management land.
And then really quickly, just before we get too far into it, I wanted to just go over some numbers real quick just to kind of show what we're looking at here. In 2018, there were 58,000 wildfires compared to 71,000 in 2017, which sounds good, and 8.8 million acres burned in comparison to 10 million in 2017.
Okay.
So then we get some more fires. But the biggest thing I want to point out here is if you notice, we're kind of reaching this point. I think it was actually recently Gavin Newsom, governor of California, said that there is no fire season in California anymore. It's just year-round. I think we're almost kind of hitting this natural point where you can only have so many fires every single year for so long.
Yeah.
So I wonder if at a certain point we're actually going to run into a point where we don't need controlled burns anymore because we've had uncontrolled burns for so many years in a row.
No, there is so much acreage that still hasn't gone. And this is where I get so furious when Democrats call Republicans science deniers. and then they don't look at the problems that their hyper environmental regulation is causing. Now, I'm going to use a perfect example from the 60s, okay? Back in the 60s, or 50s and 60s, there was a problem with the sempervirens redwood that was up in the redwood forest. Those big, beautiful redwood trees that California, or Northern California specifically, is known for. And they just were sick, and the new trees weren't growing like they were supposed to. They were worried that the forest wasn't replacing itself. And of course, at first they tried to blame global warming, and then at second they tried to blame pesticides, and at third they tried to blame drought, and they blamed everything man-made in the world until finally an old ranger spoke up and said, you know, these trees have been sick for about 15 or 20 years. And to the best of my recollection, it's been 15 or 20 years since we had a fire. So they actually initiated a bunch of controlled burns as a desperate experiment to see if that would work. And guess what? The controlled burns were popping open all of the seedlings that the cones that were falling from this specific breed of redwood tree were having trouble with. And we found out that this type of forest needs fire. Evolutionarily, it depends upon fire in order to thin itself out and in order to spread its seed. Okay, that is why we have controlled burns in many of these forest managed areas. But now enter the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, 40 or 50 years worth of Democrat rule in California and overregulation on behalf of environmentalists. And now if you want to do a controlled burn in 1 acre of land here, there's 8 different studies that you have to do that make it virtually impossible to do it. And Andrew Yang here is noticing that less than 2% of California forest land saw proactive treatment in some recent years. And he cites another statistic that 99% of the time when we engage in those proactive treatments, aka controlled burns, they're positive, they're effective, and they work. There used to be a time in California where the Department of Forest Management was actually allowed to do its job and manage the forest.
Well, that sounds like exactly what he's proposing here. He says he wants to basically change what the U.S. Forest Service is. He's going to quintuple the budget.
Well, he said more money needs to be spent on prevention.
Well, no, but they're gonna...
and quintupling the budget, honestly, with the existing budget, if you would actually take down the hurdles that make controlled burns so difficult, you could do double easily.
Well, no, but I think the key is the second part of that, and then specifically tailor the service to focus on fire prevention. And I would have to assume if there's a federal organization getting a ton of money focused purely on fire prevention, controlled burns would fall into that purview. That'd be
I don't
something
think it needs to be a federal
do.
organization, first off.
Well, but I mean,
because let's face it,
no, but
all right, Florida and the Everglades doesn't have a problem with controlled burns.
No, but you want to talk specifically in California, we have U.S. Forestry Service doing stuff in a federal organization doing stuff all the time because we have a lot of national and parks and stuff that's a lot of the fires in California. Remember, it's not all houses burning. It'll burn thousands and thousands of acres of forestry land.
This is my only fear. He says, finally, we need to align the incentives of states, developers, and homeowners to account for the dangers of mega fires, which is going to ultimately mean more coding against fires, basic coding is okay, but we already have a problem in California. There's so many laws for everything. Seismic law, fire law, brush clearance law, foundational law, entry and easement law, water rights law, electrical law. We are drowning in so many laws. It's making it so you can't build here, and it's making it so the existing homes that were already built are so expensive that we're eliminating the middle class. We're driving people into homelessness because an 800 square foot apartment costs $3,000 a month now. So I would love to see.
But at the same time, I don't like the idea, but just, the other end of it, at the same time, I would prefer my house wasn't burned in a mega fire because they built it somewhere they had no business building it, right? I mean, in theory, if there is an expanded forestry service that only focuses on wildfire,
if it was accompanied with deregulation, yes. This is why I was a fan of the UBI, because the UBI was more than just $1,000 giveaway. It was a tax, a VAT tax, that was accompanied by a dividend. I would be okay with the creation of a specific California wildfires division, that had a robust budget.
It's got to be federal.
Okay, fine. Let it be federal.
Some fires can cross state lines. Just keep it easy.
Fine. Let it be federal. I'm fine with it being federal as long as The proposed bureaucratic growth in the size and the scope of our government and our taxation is accompanied by a deregulation. Because let me tell you, if we create another bureaucracy that is dependent upon those same 8 checklists that you have to go through to do one controlled burn, now we're just creating a bureaucracy full of nothing but a bunch of fat cats paid for by tax dollars that aren't going to be able to do more than 2%, what, maybe 4? No, we need 50%.
Well, I think, like I said, I think that is the way I understand it is if you do basically, like I said, reimagine the Forest Service as something focused specifically on wildfires. I do think a lot of the stuff like the control, I think there is a argument that they would take over federally controlled burns. There'd be a department. All they do is circle areas they think could be problems. They go there, they facilitate, maybe work with local fire, but like, I think that's the only way you could actually enforce this properly across the whole country, because it's not going to be the same state by state. You need an organization that comes in and works with state authorities, but it's got to be federal because there's mega fires that will be in 2 or 3 states.
Okay. So altogether, I give this a 3/4 thumbs up because I thoroughly appreciate that Andrew Yang is talking about this and taking a serious step towards its solution. We can argue another day about the implementation, but at the end of the day, if you're an environmentalist that believes that the carbon emissions from fossil fuels and fires is important, that last fire we had in California emitted like 57 years worth of trucking carbon emissions into the atmosphere.
That's a really good point.
So from an environmental perspective, this needs to be taken care of. From a carbon emission perspective, from an economics perspective, this is the single most bipartisan thing that can be talked about in at least California and West Coast politics out there. And Andrew Yang is the only guy talking about, which I appreciate. I would want to see deregulation of the California, or at least of the forestry management areas, and I'd want to see a little bit more greasing of the slide of the bureaucracy that needs to be attached to this. But altogether, this is a 3/4, 3 out of 4 thumbs up. Good job, Andrew Yang. Yang Gang, let us know what you think. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell us what you want to talk about in the next video. We'd love to hear from you. Share this with your friends. This is Problem Solver Politics.